Welcome to the channel. Today we're diving into a story that will make you question everything you think you know about the people closest to you. What happens when Victoria Morgan, a dedicated executive assistant, discovers her cold, mysterious boss, Roberto Valenti, has been watching her every move for 2 years? And more importantly, why? When Victoria found her boss Roberto Valenti's forgotten notebook, she expected business notes. Instead, she discovered pages about her schedule, coffee preference, fears, and detailed plans to protect her from threats she didn't know existed. The man she thought she knew for 2 years was a complete stranger. Now he knows she knows his secret. If you're ready to dive into this dangerous world of obsession and protection, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because Victoria's story is just beginning, and trust me, you won't want to miss what Roberto does next. The Meridian Investment Building stood like a glass monument against the Chicago skyline, its 42nd floor humming with the quiet intensity of money being moved in digital streams. Victoria Morgan adjusted her black blazer and glanced at her watch. 8:47 p.m. The executive floor had been empty for over an hour, save for the gentle hum of computers and the distant murmur of the city below. She gathered the last of the quarterly reports, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor as she moved between offices, ensuring everything was in order for tomorrow's board meeting. This was her ritual, the final sweep that made her indispensable to Meridian's most demanding executives. As Victoria reached Roberto Valenti's corner office, she noticed something unusual. The door was slightly ajar, and warm light spilled into the hallway. Mr. Valenti never left his office unlocked, let alone illuminated after hours. For 2 years, she had worked as his executive assistant, and his routine was as predictable as Swiss clockwork. She knocked gently. "Mr. Valenti." Silence answered her. Victoria pushed the door open wider, revealing the pristine office that reflected its owner's austere personality. Everything was in its designated place. The crystal paperweights arranged symmetrically, the mahogany desk cleared of all but essential items, the leather chairs positioned at precise angles. Everything except a black leather notebook lay open on the desk, its pages scattered carelessly, as if someone had been interrupted mid-thought. Victoria approached cautiously. Roberto Valenti was many things. Intimidating, brilliant, impossibly demanding, but careless was not among them. In the 24 months she had worked for him, she had never seen so much as a pen out of place in his office. The notebook seemed to call to her, its pages rustling slightly in the air conditioning's gentle breeze. She knew she shouldn't look. Privacy was sacred in their line of work, and Roberto had made it clear that discretion was not just expected, but mandatory. But curiosity is a powerful force, especially when it involves a man who had remained an enigma despite their daily interactions. Victoria glanced toward the office entrance, confirming she was alone, then leaned closer to the notebook. The handwriting was Roberto's. She recognized the sharp, controlled script from the hundreds of documents she had processed for him. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. The page was titled Victoria Weekly Pattern Analysis. Below it, in Roberto's precise handwriting, Monday, arrives 7:45 a.m., exactly 15 minutes early, takes coffee black, no sugar, avoids the main elevator when crowded, prefers the service elevator or waits. Lunch at 12:30 p.m., usually salad from the deli on Michigan Avenue. Leaves building 6:15 p.m., unless urgent projects require overtime. Tuesday, same coffee preference. Notice she reads during lunch, currently The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Sits at corner table in building's cafeteria, back to the wall, facing the entrance. Security conscious without realizing it. Wednesday, parking spot preference. Northeast corner of garage, under light near exit. Always locks car twice. Checks back seat before entering vehicle. Victoria's hands began to tremble. This wasn't business analysis. This was surveillance. Detailed, methodical, and disturbingly accurate surveillance of her daily life. She flipped to the next page, her heart hammering against her ribs. Personal preferences and behavioral patterns. Dislikes unexpected physical contact. Noticed she steps back when colleagues invade personal space. Possible trauma indicator or simply personality trait. Further observation required. Unconsciously bites her lower lip when nervous during meetings or when confronted with unexpected situations. Small, delicate gesture but impossibly distracting. Happens exactly 3 to 5 times during stressful board meetings. She has no idea she does it. Touches a strand of her hair when anxious. Twirls it between her fingers during difficult conversations. Wonder if she realizes how distracting this is, or if it's completely unconscious. Probably unconscious. She's always innocent in her gestures. Financial habits, conservative spender, but purchases expensive coffee every Friday. Small luxury she allows herself. Does not wear jewelry except small silver necklace. Possible sentimental value. Social patterns. Limited romantic relationships observed over past 18 months. Drinks with colleagues occasionally, but maintains professional boundaries. Defensive about personal life when questioned. Lip biting increases significantly when pressed for personal details. The words blurred as Victoria tried to process what she was reading. Every detail was accurate, every observation unnervingly precise. This man had been studying her like a specimen under a microscope. She turned another page, and her blood went cold. Potential threat assessment. Victoria Morgan. Vulnerability points. 1. Walks alone to parking garage. Minimal security presence between 6 to 7 p.m. 2. Regular route home via Michigan Avenue. Predictable pattern. Multiple interception points. 3. Lives alone in Lincoln Park apartment. Minimal building security. 4. No family in Chicago. Limited support network threat mitigation strategies. Markers stationed in garage during her departure times. Regular patrol of Michigan Avenue route between 6:30–7:30 p.m. Building superintendent contacted. Additional security measures implemented. Weekly threat assessment from intelligence sources. Victoria's legs gave out, and she collapsed into Roberto's leather chair. This wasn't just observation, it was protection. But protection from what? And why? She flipped frantically through more pages, finding detailed analyses of every person who had approached her in the past year. The barista who had asked for her number last month. Potential threat level, low. Background check complete. No connections to hostile families. The new accountant who had invited her to lunch, removed from proximity to Victoria. Transferred to Boston office. Reason: asking too many personal questions about her schedule. "Oh God," Victoria whispered, her voice echoing in the empty office. "What have you done, Roberto?" The final section made her nausea complete. It was titled Family Integration Timeline and contained what could only be described as a long-term strategic plan for gradually introducing her to his real life. The dates spanned the next 2 years, with milestones marked. Casual mention of Italian heritage, introduction to concept of family loyalty, assessment of loyalty threshold, full disclosure contingent on threat level escalation. The sound of approaching footsteps in the hallway made Victoria's heart stop entirely. She tried to close the notebook, but her hands were shaking too violently to coordinate the movement. The footsteps grew closer. Panic flooded her system as she realized she was trapped. Roberto's office had only one entrance, and the footsteps were definitely heading in her direction. She managed to close the notebook just as a familiar silhouette appeared in the doorway. Roberto Valenti stood framed by the hallway light, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the office floor. Even at nearly 9 p.m., his charcoal suit remained immaculate, his dark hair perfectly styled. But it was his eyes that made Victoria's breath catch. Those steel-grey eyes that she had always found intimidating were now absolutely terrifying. "Victoria." His voice was calm, controlled, exactly as it had been every day for 2 years. "You're working late." She tried to speak, but her throat had closed entirely. The notebook lay between them on the desk like evidence of a crime. Her hand moved unconsciously to a strand of her hair, twirling it nervously between her fingers, exactly as Roberto had documented. Roberto stepped into the office, closing the door behind him, with a soft click that sounded impossibly loud in the silence. His gaze moved from Victoria's pale face to her nervous gesture with her hair, then to the notebook, then back to her eyes. Something flickered in his expression, recognition of his own observations coming to life before him. "I see you found something that belongs to me," he said, his tone giving away nothing. I was just—" Victoria's voice came out as a croak. "Curious?" Roberto moved around the desk with predatory grace, each step measured and deliberate. "It's a natural human trait. I don't blame you for looking." He reached for the notebook, his fingers brushing hers as he picked it up. The contact sent electricity through her entire body. Fear, attraction, and something else she couldn't name. "The question is," Roberto continued, his eyes never leaving hers, "what do you plan to do with what you've learned?" Victoria found her voice, though it trembled with emotion. "What am I supposed to think, Roberto? You've been watching me, documenting my life like I'm some kind of project. Is that what you think this is?" He held up the notebook. "A project? What else would you call it?" The words came out sharper than she intended, fueled by a mixture of fear and indignation. She unconsciously bit her lower lip as soon as the words left her mouth, a nervous habit she was unaware of, but Roberto had been cataloguing for months. "You know everything about me. My schedule, my habits, my fears. You've been manipulating my life without my knowledge." Something shifted in Roberto's expression, a crack in the carefully maintained facade. For just a moment, Victoria glimpsed something vulnerable beneath the surface. "Manipulation," he repeated slowly. "Is that truly what you believe? What would you call it?" Victoria stood, placing the desk between them like a barrier. "You've been stalking me for 2 years. Protecting you." The words came out quiet, but firm. Victoria stared at him. "Protecting me from what?" Roberto was silent for a long moment, his grey eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her feel exposed. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight she had never heard before. "What did you think I was, Victoria?" The question hung between them like a challenge. Victoria realized that in 2 years of working closely together, she had never really questioned Roberto's background. He was wealthy, powerful, spoke multiple languages fluently, and commanded respect that bordered on fear from even the most influential clients. She had assumed it was simply the natural authority of a successful businessman. But now, with the notebook's revelations fresh in her mind, she began to see patterns she had previously ignored. The way people deferred to him, not just professionally, but personally. The phone calls he took in Italian that ended conversations abruptly. The visitors who came to his office unannounced and left looking either grateful or terrified. "I thought you were a businessman," she said finally. Roberto's smile was cold and humorless. "I am a businessman, Victoria. Just not the kind you learned about in your MBA program." The words hit her like a physical blow. Victoria gripped the edge of the desk for support as the pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. "Roberto Valenti," she whispered, testing the name on her tongue as if hearing it for the first time. "Valenti?" "Yes." He watched her face as understanding dawned. "The Valenti family has been in Chicago for 4 generations. We have interests in construction, shipping, waste management, and various other enterprises." The euphemism hung in the air like smoke. Victoria had grown up in Chicago. She knew exactly what various other enterprises meant when spoken by a man named Valenti. "You're—" She couldn't bring herself to say the word. "I'm exactly what you think I am." Roberto's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing the weather. "And for the past 2 years, Victoria Morgan, you have been under the protection of one of Chicago's most powerful crime families." The room seemed to spin around her. Victoria gripped the desk harder, her knuckles white with tension. "Why?" "Because," Roberto said, moving closer despite the desk between them, "you became important to me, and anything important to a Valenti becomes a target." Victoria's mind reeled as she tried to process this information. Important how? I'm just your assistant. Are you? Roberto's eyes held hers with an intensity that made her stomach flutter despite her fear. Is that really all you think you are to me, Victoria? Before she could respond, his phone buzzed with an urgent text. Roberto glanced at it, and his expression darkened immediately. "We're out of time," he said, his voice sharp with sudden urgency. He moved to his desk, pulling out a key and unlocking a drawer Victoria had never seen opened. From inside, he retrieved a gun, sleek, black, and unmistakably real. Victoria's breath caught as he checked it with practiced efficiency before sliding it into a shoulder holster beneath his jacket. "Roberto, what's happening?" He was already moving toward the door, his entire demeanor transformed from businessman to something far more dangerous. At the threshold, he turned back to her, his grey eyes intense with an emotion she couldn't identify. "Tomorrow you'll understand everything, Victoria. But for tonight," he paused, his voice dropping to something almost tender. "Just don't leave the building alone. Wait for Marcus in the lobby. He'll take you home." "Who's Marcus?" But Roberto was already gone, his footsteps echoing down the hallway with military precision. Victoria stood alone in his office, surrounded by the lingering scent of his cologne and the weight of knowledge that would change everything. She sank back into his chair, her hands shaking as she stared at the place where the notebook had been. In the space of 20 minutes, her entire world had crumbled and rebuilt itself around a truth she never could have imagined. Roberto Valenti, her cold, demanding, impossibly attractive boss, was a member of the Mafia, and somehow, inexplicably, she had become important enough to him that he had spent 2 years secretly protecting her from dangers she didn't even know existed. As the full implications settled over her, Victoria realized that tomorrow would bring answers she wasn't sure she was brave enough to hear. But one thing was certain. Her life, as she knew it, was over. The woman who would walk into this office tomorrow would not be the same Victoria Morgan who had discovered that notebook tonight. That version of herself, naive, safe, predictable, had died the moment she read Roberto's careful documentation of her life. Now she just had to figure out who she would become instead. Victoria had barely slept, her mind replaying every moment of the previous evening in excruciating detail. She arrived at Meridian Investment at exactly 7:45 a.m., just as Roberto's notebook had predicted, but everything felt different now. The familiar lobby seemed like a stage set, and she found herself scanning faces, wondering who else might be part of Roberto's elaborate protection scheme. The security guard who had always greeted her warmly, was he one of Roberto's people? The barista in the building's coffee shop who knew her order by heart, had Roberto arranged that too? Every interaction felt suspect, every kindness potentially calculated. Victoria's hands trembled as she pressed the elevator button, Roberto's warning echoing in her mind. "Don't leave the building alone." She had waited for Marcus the night before, a mountain of a man with kind eyes and a Chicago accent, who had introduced himself as her driver and insisted on walking her to her apartment door. He had been polite, professional, and absolutely terrifying in his obvious capability. Now, as the elevator climbed toward the executive floor, Victoria tried to prepare herself for facing Roberto. How did one have a conversation with a man who had just revealed himself to be both a criminal and her secret protector? The elevator dinged softly as it reached the 42nd floor. Victoria stepped into the familiar hallway, her heels clicking against marble that had witnessed whatever conversation was coming. Roberto's office door was closed, but light spilled from beneath it, indicating he was already at work. Victoria moved to her own desk, trying to maintain some semblance of normalcy. She powered up her computer, reviewed Roberto's schedule, prepared his coffee exactly as she had for 2 years, but her hands shook as she carried the cup toward his office, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim. She knocked gently on the door. "Come in." Roberto's voice was exactly as it had always been, controlled, authoritative, giving nothing away. Victoria entered to find Roberto sitting behind his desk, reviewing documents with the same focused intensity she had observed every morning. He looked up as she approached, and for a moment, She saw something vulnerable in his grey eyes before his expression returned to its usual neutrality. "Your coffee, Mr. Valenti," she said, her voice barely steady. "Thank you, Victoria. Please sit down." He gestured to the chair across from his desk, the same chair where she had collapsed upon reading his notebook less than 12 hours earlier. Victoria sat carefully, her back straight, hands folded in her lap. They stared at each other across the expanse of mahogany, two people who had worked in perfect synchronization for 2 years, but were now complete strangers. "You have questions," Roberto said finally. "I have 1,000 questions." Victoria's voice was steadier now, fueled by a night of analyzing her situation. "But let's start with the most important one. Why me?" Roberto leaned back in his chair, studying her with those penetrating grey eyes. "That's complicated. Simplify it." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "There's the spirit I've been waiting to see." "Don't deflect, Roberto. I deserve answers." "You do." He stood, moving to the window that offered a panoramic view of Manhattan. "It started professionally. You were recommended by the placement agency as someone with impeccable credentials and absolute discretion. I needed an assistant who could handle sensitive information without asking questions. And you exceeded every expectation." Roberto turned back to face her. "You were intelligent, capable, completely trustworthy. But more than that." He paused, something shifting in his expression. "You treated me like a human being." Victoria frowned. "What do you mean? Do you know what it's like to live in a world where everyone who speaks to you is either seeking your approval or terrified of your disapproval? Where every conversation is calculated, every gesture measured?" Roberto's voice carried an exhaustion she had never heard before. "For 2 years you have been the only person in my life who simply existed around me without an agenda. I was doing my job." "No." Roberto moved closer, his intensity making the air feel electric. "You brought me coffee because you noticed I worked late, not because I demanded it. You remembered my preferences because you paid attention, not because you feared consequences. You smiled at me because something genuinely amused you, not because you thought it would curry favor." Victoria felt something stirring in her chest, a dangerous warmth that threatened her ability to think clearly. "That still doesn't explain the surveillance, Roberto. The protection detail I never asked for." Roberto's expression darkened. 3 months after you started working here, I received intelligence that the Benedetti family was looking for ways to strike at me personally. They had identified you as someone important in my daily life." "Important how? I was just your assistant." "Were you?" Roberto asked quietly. "Because by that point, Victoria, you were the best part of my day, the only part that felt real." The admission hung between them like a confession. Victoria felt her breath catch as she processed the implications. "So you decided to protect me without telling me?" "I decided to keep you alive." Roberto's voice hardened. "Do you know what the Benedetti family does to send messages? They don't just kill, Victoria, they make examples." Victoria's stomach clenched at the cold certainty in his voice. "You could have told me, given me a choice." "What choice?" Roberto demanded. "Quit your job and disappear, live in fear for the rest of your life, or stay and let me handle the threats the way I know how." "The way you know how," Victoria repeated. "Which involves what, exactly?" Roberto was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft and absolutely terrifying. "Whatever is necessary." The words sent a chill down Victoria's spine. She was beginning to understand that the man sitting across from her lived in a world with different rules, different consequences, different definitions of necessity. "Show me," she said suddenly. Roberto blinked. "What?" "Show me what you've been protecting me from. I want to see the threats you've been so worried about." Roberto studied her face carefully. "You think you want to know, but—" "Don't tell me what I want," Victoria interrupted, surprising herself with her firmness. "I've been living in ignorance for 2 years while you made decisions about my life. If I'm going to understand any of this, I need the whole truth." Roberto hesitated, then reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a thick manila folder. He placed it on the desk between them. "Intelligence reports on the Benedetti family's activities over the past 18 months, he said quietly. "Specific references to you are highlighted." Victoria opened the folder and immediately wished she hadn't. The first document was a surveillance photo of her leaving the building, with notes in the margin detailing her vulnerable walking route. The second was a floor plan of her apartment building with entry points marked. As she flipped through more pages, the true scope of the threat became terrifyingly clear. There were photos of her taken from a distance, detailed analyses of her schedule, even speculation about the best times and methods for abduction. But it was the final document that made her blood run cold. It was a transcript of a recorded conversation between two men discussing her in terms that made her feel sick. The assistant would be perfect. Valenti's been soft on her, seen them together. If we take her, he'll do anything to get her back. How do we know she's important enough? Trust me, the way he watches her. She's important. Maybe even more than important. We take her. We own him. Victoria closed the folder with shaking hands. When was this recorded? 6 months ago. She looked up at Roberto, seeing him with completely new eyes. You've been fighting a war, and I've been the prize. No, Roberto said firmly. You've never been a prize, Victoria. You've been the reason for the war. The distinction hit her with unexpected force. Victoria had spent her entire adult life trying to be independent, self-sufficient, in control of her own destiny. The idea that she had unknowingly become the center of a deadly conflict between criminal families was both terrifying and somehow significant. What happens now? She asked. Now you have the choice I couldn't give you before, Roberto said. You know what I am, who I am, and what being close to me means. You can walk away. I'll arrange new identity, new life, complete protection until the threats pass. Or, Roberto's grey eyes held hers with an intensity that made her heart race. Or you stay, and you let me show you what it really means to be under the protection of the Valenti family. Victoria stared at him, understanding that this was the pivotal moment. Everything in her rational mind screamed that she should take the new identity and run. Roberto Valenti was dangerous, his world was violent, and staying would mean accepting a life she had never chosen. But as she looked at him, really looked at him, she saw something that made her pause. Beneath the controlled exterior, behind the careful mask of authority, there was vulnerability. Roberto Valenti, feared leader of one of New York's most powerful crime families, was terrified that she would leave. If I stay, Victoria said slowly, what does that mean exactly? It means you become family, Roberto said quietly. It means the full protection and resources of the Valenti organization. It means you learn our ways, our codes, our loyalties, and it means... What? Roberto stood, moving around the desk until he was close enough that she could smell his cologne, see the flecks of darker grey in his eyes. It means I stop pretending that what I feel for you is professional. Victoria's breath caught. The careful distance they had maintained for 2 years suddenly felt like an act they were both tired of performing. Roberto, I know it's complicated, he said softly. I know I've turned your life upside down, but I need you to know that every decision I made, every protection I put in place came from here. He pressed his hand to his chest, not from strategy or business or family obligation, from here. Victoria stood as well, bringing them face to face. You're asking me to give up everything I thought I knew about myself, about my life. I'm asking you to trust me with everything you are, Roberto corrected. The woman who brought me coffee because she noticed I looked tired. The woman who reorganized my entire filing system without being asked because she thought it would help. The woman who laughed at my terrible jokes and never once made me feel like a monster. You're not a monster, Victoria said softly, surprising herself. I am, Roberto replied. But maybe with you, I could be something else too. Before Victoria could respond, Roberto's phone buzzed urgently. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted immediately to high alert. "We have a problem," he said, his voice sharp. "Benedetti moved faster than we anticipated." "What do you mean?" Roberto was already moving, his entire demeanor transformed. "They know about last night. They know you've seen the notebook." He grabbed his jacket, checking his gun in one fluid motion. "Victoria, I need you to listen very carefully. In about 10 minutes, Marcus is going to come through that door. You're going to go with him immediately, no questions asked." "Where?" "Somewhere safe." Roberto's eyes met hers with desperate intensity. "Somewhere they'll never find you while I deal with this." "Deal with what?" Roberto paused at the door, his hand on the handle. When he looked back at her, Victoria saw something in his eyes she had never seen before: fear. "The Benedetti family just declared war, Victoria, and you're the first casualty they're planning to take." The safe house was nothing like Victoria had expected. Instead of a grim hideout, Marcus had brought her to an elegant brownstone in Lincoln Park that felt more like a luxury hotel than a criminal refuge. The interior was warm and sophisticated, with Persian rugs, leather furniture, and artwork that looked genuinely expensive rather than ostentatiously displayed. "Mr. Valenti wants you to be comfortable," Marcus explained, as he showed her to a beautifully appointed bedroom on the second floor. "This place has been in the family for 20 years, completely secure." Victoria sat on the edge of the king-sized bed, still processing the rapid turn her life had taken. 6 hours ago, she had been trying to have a normal conversation with her boss about his revelation. Now she was in witness protection from a Mafia war she had unknowingly started. "How long will I need to stay here?" she asked. Marcus's expression was carefully neutral. "As long as it takes, Miss Morgan." That had been 3 days ago. Victoria had spent the time alternating between anxiety and boredom, pacing the elegantly furnished rooms while trying to make sense of her situation. She wasn't a prisoner. Marcus made that clear, but she also wasn't free to leave. The brownstone felt like a beautiful cage. On the evening of the third day, Victoria heard the front door open and voices in the downstairs hallway. She recognized Roberto's voice immediately, though it sounded different, harder, more authoritative than she had ever heard it in the office. She moved to the top of the staircase, listening to the conversation below. "Status report," Roberto's voice carried up the stairs. "The warehouse situation is contained," another voice replied, someone Victoria didn't recognize. "3 of theirs down, none of ours. They got the message. And the leak? Handled permanently." The casual way the word permanently was delivered made Victoria's stomach clench. "Good. What about the girl?" Victoria's breath caught. They were talking about her. "Safe. Marcus says she's been asking questions but cooperating. No attempts to leave. She's not a prisoner, Sal. Make sure Marcus understands that. Boss, with respect, she's seen the notebook, knows about the family, witnessed a declaration of war. She's either with us completely or what?" Roberto's voice carried a dangerous edge. "Or she's a liability that needs to be managed." The silence that followed was charged with menace. When Roberto spoke again, his voice was soft and absolutely terrifying. "Victoria Morgan is under my personal protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me directly. Anyone who even suggests she's a liability answers to me directly. Are we clear, Sal?" "Crystal, boss." Victoria heard footsteps approaching the staircase and quickly moved back to her room, closing the door softly. A few moments later, there was a gentle knock. "Victoria, it's Roberto. May I come in?" She opened the door to find him standing in the hallway, and her breath caught. Roberto looked exhausted, his usually perfect appearance showing signs of strain. His suit was wrinkled, there was a shadow of stubble on his jaw, and his grey eyes held a weariness that made her heart ache. "You look terrible," she said before she could stop herself. Roberto's mouth quirked in a tired smile. "Thank you. That's exactly what a man wants to hear from a beautiful woman." Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks at the casual compliment. You know what I meant. May I? He gestured toward her room. Victoria stepped aside, allowing him to enter. Roberto moved to the window, looking out at the quiet street below. In the lamplight, he looked like a general surveying a battlefield. "How are you holding up?" he asked without turning around. "I've been better," Victoria said honestly. "Roberto, I heard voices downstairs. What's happening?" Roberto turned to face her, his expression careful. "The situation is being handled." "That's not an answer." "It's the only answer I can give you right now." Victoria moved closer to him, close enough to see the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes. "You said I had a choice. Staying meant learning your ways, your codes, your loyalties. Well, I'm still here. So stop protecting me from the truth." Roberto studied her face for a long moment. "You really want to know?" "I really want to know." Roberto nodded slowly, then moved to sit in the armchair by the window, gesturing for Victoria to take the chair across from him. "The Benedetti family made their move yesterday. They hit one of our warehouses, killed 2 of our guys." Victoria felt something cold settle in her stomach. "Because of me. Because of their greed and stupidity," Roberto corrected firmly. "You were just the excuse they used to justify starting a war they've wanted for years." "What did you do?" Roberto's eyes met hers directly. "What had to be done? We hit back, harder. Made it clear that attacking our people has consequences." Victoria understood the euphemism. "You killed people." "Yes." Roberto's voice was matter of fact. "I killed people, Victoria. That's what I do when someone threatens my family." The casual admission should have terrified her. Instead, Victoria found herself studying Roberto's face, seeing something she had missed before. The weight of those decisions was written in the lines around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. He wasn't a monster who enjoyed violence. He was a man carrying the burden of necessary choices. "How do you live with it?" she asked softly. Roberto was quiet for a moment. "You tell yourself that every life you take protects the people you love. You tell yourself that in this world it's kill or be killed. You tell yourself that the alternative, letting enemies think you're weak, would cost more lives in the long run. Do you believe that?" "Most days." Roberto's honesty was brutal. "Some days I wonder if I've become something my grandfather would be ashamed of. Other days I know I've become exactly what this family needed to survive." Victoria leaned forward in her chair. "Which kind of day is today?" Roberto's smile was sad and tired. "Today I'm wondering if keeping you in my life is the most selfish thing I've ever done." "What do you mean?" "You could have a normal life, Victoria. Husband, children, white picket fence, all of it. Instead, you're sitting in a safe house while I wage war against people who want to hurt you to get to me." Roberto's voice was heavy with guilt. "Maybe Sal was right. Maybe you are better off—" "Don't!" Victoria's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare make that decision for me." Roberto looked up, surprised by her vehemence. "For 2 years, you made decisions about my life without consulting me," Victoria continued, standing and moving toward him. "You protected me, watched me, managed threats against me, all without giving me a choice. I understand why you did it, but I won't let you make this choice for me too." "Victoria." "No." She moved closer, until she was standing directly in front of his chair. "You want to know what I think? I think you're terrified that I'll choose to stay, because then you'll have to face the fact that someone actually sees who you are and chooses to love you anyway." The word love hung in the air between them like a challenge. Roberto stared up at her, something raw and vulnerable flickering across his features. "You don't know what you're saying," he said quietly. "Don't I?" Victoria reached out, placing her hand against his cheek. The contact sent electricity through both of them. "Roberto, in the past 3 days, I've learned that my life has been a carefully orchestrated performance, that I'm the center of a criminal war, and that the man I work for is one of the most dangerous people in New York. You know what my biggest fear has been?" Roberto's voice was barely a whisper. "What?" "That you'll decide I'm too much trouble and send me away before I can figure out how I really feel about all of this." Roberto's hand came up to cover hers, pressing her palm more firmly against his face. "And how do you feel about all of this?" Victoria looked into his grey eyes, seeing past the careful control to the man beneath. "Terrified, confused, angry that you didn't trust me with the truth sooner." She paused, her thumb tracing along his cheekbone. "And completely irrationally drawn to you in a way that probably makes me crazy." Roberto's eyes closed, as if her words caused him physical pain. "Victoria, I know what you are," she continued softly. "I know what your world involves. I know the risks, the dangers, the moral complexities, but I also know that you spent 2 years protecting me not because I was an asset or a liability, but because I mattered to you. And you matter to me too, Roberto. More than you should, more than is safe, more than makes any logical sense." Roberto opened his eyes, and Victoria saw something she had never seen before. Hope, raw and desperate, and absolutely devastating. "If you stay," he said quietly, "there's no going back. Once you're truly part of this family, once you know all our secrets, see all our business. Victoria, there's no leaving. Ever." "Are you warning me or threatening me?" "I'm being honest with you." Completely honest for the first time. Roberto stood, bringing them close enough that Victoria could feel the heat of his body. "I want you to stay more than I've ever wanted anything in my life. But if you do, you need to understand what you're choosing." "Then show me," Victoria said, echoing her words from 3 days earlier. "Show me what I'm choosing." Roberto searched her face, looking for any sign of doubt or fear. Finding none, he nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "But first you need to understand something else." "What?" Roberto's hands came up to frame her face, his thumbs tracing along her cheekbones. "I'm in love with you, Victoria Morgan. Completely, obsessively, probably unhealthily in love with you. Have been for months, maybe longer. Every decision I've made, every protection I've put in place, every line I've crossed, it's all been because I couldn't bear the thought of losing you." Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. "Roberto, I needed you to know that before you make your choice," he continued. "Because if you stay, it won't just be as part of the family. It'll be as mine, completely mine, in every way that matters." The possessiveness in his voice should have alarmed her. Instead, Victoria felt something deep inside her respond to his claim with devastating intensity. "And if I want to be yours?" she asked softly. Roberto's control finally snapped. He pulled her against him, his mouth claiming hers in a kiss that was desperate, passionate, and filled with 2 years of suppressed longing. Victoria melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal desperation. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Roberto rested his forehead against hers. "Are you sure?" he whispered. Victoria looked into his eyes and saw her future. Dangerous, unpredictable, morally complex, but absolutely real, in a way her old life had never been. "I'm sure," she said, "but I have conditions." Roberto smiled, and for the first time in days he looked genuinely happy. "Name them. I want to know everything. All of it. No more secrets, no more protecting me from the truth. Done. And I want to be useful. I don't want to be just your girlfriend hiding in safe houses. I want to contribute, to be part of the solution." Roberto's expression grew thoughtful. "That can be arranged. You have skills we could use. One more thing." Victoria's voice grew serious. "I need to know that you see me as an equal partner, not just someone to be protected. If we do this, we do it together." Roberto was quiet for a moment, considering. "That's the hardest condition, Victoria. Every instinct I have will be to shield you from the worst parts of this life. Then we'll both have to learn to trust each other more than our instincts." Roberto nodded slowly. "All right, equal partners." He paused, his expression growing intense. "But Victoria, if you're mine, then I'm yours too, completely. And I need to know you understand what that means." "What does it mean?" Roberto's voice was soft, but absolutely certain. It means that you're the most important thing in my world now. More important than business, than family loyalty, than my own life. It means I would burn down everything I've built before I'd let anyone hurt you." Victoria felt something deep and primal respond to his words. "Roberto, it means that you have more power over me than anyone should have over a man in my position," he continued, "and it means I'm trusting you with that power completely." Victoria understood the weight of what he was offering her. Roberto Valenti, feared leader of one of Chicago's most powerful crime families, was making himself completely vulnerable to her. "I won't abuse that trust," she said softly. "I know." Roberto's smile was soft and genuinely peaceful. "I've known that about you from the beginning. It's why I fell in love with you in the first place." 6 months later, Victoria sat behind a mahogany desk in the Valenti family's legitimate business headquarters, reviewing contracts for their construction company. The work was fascinating, using her MBA skills to optimize operations while ensuring all activities remained completely legal. She had kept her word about wanting to be useful. Under Roberto's guidance, she had revolutionized their legitimate enterprises, implementing systems that increased efficiency and profitability while creating an unshakable legal foundation for the family's operations. The door to her office opened, and Roberto entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. He had started bringing her coffee every morning, a reversal of their old routine that never failed to make her smile. "Any interesting discoveries today?" he asked, setting her cup on the desk and leaning against the edge. Victoria looked up at him, still sometimes amazed by how much her life had changed. Roberto looked relaxed and genuinely happy in a way she had never seen during their years in the corporate office. "Actually, yes," she said, picking up a folder from her desk. "I think I found something important." "Oh?" Victoria opened the folder and withdrew a small leather notebook. Black, expensive, exactly like the one Roberto had left on his desk that night 6 months ago. Roberto's eyes widened as she placed it on the desk between them. "Victoria, I thought you might like to know what I've been writing about you," she said with a smile. Roberto picked up the notebook with something approaching reverence, opening it to the first page. Victoria watched his expression change as he read her careful notations. Roberto, daily observations. Takes his coffee black, but adds sugar when he thinks no one is watching. Still trying to maintain that tough image. Speaks to his mother in Italian every Sunday at exactly 2 p.m. Voice becomes softer, gentler. The dangerous crime boss disappears, replaced by someone's beloved son. Sleeps poorly when he's worried about family business. Pretends he doesn't, but I can see it in his eyes. Never kills anyone without it weighing on him, despite what he tells others. The cost of leadership in his world is written in the tension he carries in his shoulders. Roberto looked up at her, his grey eyes bright with emotion. "Victoria." "There's more," she said softly. Roberto turned the page and found a section titled, "Why I Stay." "Not because I don't have a choice. I always have a choice. Not because I'm afraid to leave. Roberto would protect me no matter what I decided. I stay because Roberto Valenti, dangerous, powerful, feared Roberto Valenti, brings me coffee every morning and asks about my day because he genuinely cares about the answer. I stay because he trusted me with his truth when he could have sent me away safely. I stay because he made me a partner in every sense of the word, never just a protected possession. I stay because somewhere between hiding from his enemies and learning his world, I fell completely in love with a man who sees me as his equal, even when it terrifies him. I stay because he loves me enough to let me choose, even when my choice could destroy everything he's built to protect me." Roberto closed the notebook carefully, his hands not quite steady. When he looked at Victoria, she saw something in his expression that took her breath away. Complete, devastating happiness. "I love you," he said simply. "I love you too," Victoria replied. "All of you. Even the parts that should probably scare me more than they do." Roberto moved around the desk, pulling her from her chair and into his arms. Have I mentioned lately that you're the best thing that ever happened to me? Victoria laughed, wrapping her arms around his neck. Only every day. Good, because I plan to keep saying it every day for the rest of our lives. As Roberto kissed her, Victoria reflected on the strange path that had brought them here. 6 months ago, she had been living a careful, predictable life, never suspecting that her cold, mysterious boss was documenting her every move out of love, rather than surveillance. Now she was part of something larger, more complex, and infinitely more real than anything she had ever imagined. She was Victoria Morgan Valenti in all but name, equal partner to one of Chicago's most powerful men, trusted with secrets that could destroy lives, and entrusted with a love that had already transformed hers. The notebook that had started everything sat on her desk like a reminder that the most life-changing discoveries often came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes protection disguised as surveillance, sometimes love disguised as professional distance, and sometimes, Victoria thought as Roberto held her close, the greatest adventure of your life began with simply being curious enough to open a book that wasn't meant for your eyes. Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of this story. I truly hope it stayed with you long after the last word. Now I want to hear from you. If you had been in Victoria's place and discovered what was written in that notebook, would you have closed it and walked away? Or would you have stayed to learn the truth? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And before you go, take a moment to check if you're already subscribed to the channel. We share new stories every day. Stories about power, silence, and the choices that change everything. Your support means more than you know. Thank you for being here. You are essential to the growth of this channel, and we couldn't do this without you.